What are the symptoms of Candida? If you haven't been feeling yourself lately, or maybe you've been dealing with ongoing yeast infections, you may have been wondering if you have an underlying Candida infection. If this sounds familiar, then you have come to the right place because in today's video, I'm here to not only answer that question, but give you proven solutions. Let's dive right on in. Hi, I'm Dr. Kelly Shockley, Doctor of Cause, chiropractic, board certified in sports medicine, and specialized in clinical nutrition. In this video, we're going to be going over the most common symptoms you could be experiencing if you have an underlying Candida infection. And believe me, there's a lot more to it than just chronic yeast infections. Then we'll be covering the most common triggers of a Candida infection. It's not enough to just treat the symptoms. You want to keep it from recurring in the first place, right? And finally, I will be sharing with you the most effective natural treatment for stopping a Candida infection in its tracks. There's more to do than just an antifungal if you actually want long-lasting results. Okay, let's dive in. So, what are the most common symptoms of a Candida infection? Well, there is a list of them, so why don't we just kind of go through each one? We've already mentioned chronic, recurring yeast infections. It's not just, one every now and again. It is one right after the next, and you're just not seeming to ever be free from them. That could actually be an indication that there's a bigger underlying yeast infection, Candida, in your system, not just locally. Another very common symptom that people could write off for a multitude of different reasons would be chronic fatigue. Something that people who are dealing with Candida also experience is brain fog. Like you're just living in a haze, there's no mental clarity, you can't think straight any longer. Believe it or not, that very much so could be a positive indicator of a Candida infection. Oftentimes, people who are suffering from a Candida infection are also dealing with lots of different types of digestive symptoms, whether it's gas or bloating, cramping, constipation, diarrhea, nausea, you name it, all of them can apply and be related to an underlying Candida infection. Having a weakened immune system is something that is also associated with Candida infections. So, maybe you were the person who never used to get sick, and now all of a sudden you seem to catch everything you come in contact with. Or maybe you still don't get sick very often, but when you do get sick, it seems to be more significant, more pronounced, and lasts longer than what it used to. That might be an indicator of an underlying Candida infection. One that people generally never associate with Candida infections are ongoing sinus infections. So if you have reoccurring sinus infections and you just can't make any headway, could very much so be related to an underlying Candida infection that's just not being addressed. Another set of, I wouldn't necessarily call them symptoms, but maybe more the result of having an underlying Candida infection would be different types of food sensitivities. Maybe to the most common things that people seem to be sensitive to already, or maybe you just can't eat the same foods you always used to. And it's not something that would be suspicious, like gluten or nuts or eggs, or wheat. So underlying food sensitivities can be actually associated with an underlying Candida infection. Another one that I don't believe there's much awareness around is just having a lower level of mood. Maybe not necessarily full-blown depression, but heading in that direction. Just not having any joy, not being motivated to get out of bed, not really wanting to hang out with people, anything that is in the realms of depression, but not quite to the degree, or even depression itself could have an underlying Candida infection presentation that might be provoking all of those symptoms. And oftentimes, one that is also kind of deceiving, not one that we would think of firsthand that could be related to Candida, are achy joints all throughout the body. So if you're experiencing not just one, but maybe many of these different symptoms and they've been ongoing, it could provide some strong evidence that you are probably dealing with an underlying Candida infection. And I'm super curious, did you know that all of those types of symptoms could be the result of a Candida infection? Let me know down in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And I read every single one of my comments and love when you guys engage with me. So definitely tell me what you're thinking. Is this new? Is it old? Does this make a lot more sense? Is this creating some light bulb moments of okay, yep, probably dealing with a Candida infection, or whatever feedback you have for me, just drop that down in the comments below. Okay, let's get into the most common triggers of Candida infections. And believe it or not, some of these triggers are not just what provokes or makes you more vulnerable to a Candida infection, but avoiding these triggers are going to help you actually get over your Candida infection. Of all of these, one that is extremely common and really provokes infections to come on, or is keeping you from getting over one, is a high sugar diet. Okay. Now, maybe you don't just reach for candy and cookies and cakes all the time, but if you have a lot of carbohydrates in your diet, even from naturally occurring sources like eating a huge amount of fruit, that might actually be something that's provoking the current infection or setting you up for a future infection. Another one that I think more people have awareness about of being a big trigger is being on an antibiotic. Antibiotics might have their time and place when they're needed, but they disrupt the normal balance of your gut flora, that ecosystem that lives inside of you, known as the microbiome. And when you take antibiotics, not only do they kill the bad guys, but they kill off some of the good guys. And literally, they create an imbalance in that system, which allows for opportunistic types of infection like Candida, so a yeast overgrowth, to actually occur. Another one that people don't really associate a whole lot, but it's pretty significant, is chronic stress. Okay? Stress messes up everything in the body. So if you're not regularly doing something to help at least manage stress, because we all know that stress is not really avoidable in its entirety, if there's ways to decompress or to disassociate from stressful types of humans or events or circumstances, and you can get those out of your world, that's great. But we can't do that with everything. So if you're at least managing stress, that will help decrease the likelihood of a overgrowth of Candida or an ongoing infection. Another interesting trigger that most females, I don't believe, are aware of is being on birth control. There's something within the medication and how that all works with female reproductive that unfortunately does set you up for being more prone to yeast infections and ultimately Candida infections. If you happen to be a diabetic already, that makes you more vulnerable to Candida infections. Biggest thing is really working hard to balance your blood sugar levels and not constantly stressing them. Because again, it goes right back to the number one trigger of a yeast infection or a Candida infection is lots of sugar or lots of carbohydrates or foods that contain lots of sugars. That's going to provoke all of this. And then one of the triggers that people really don't have a lot of awareness of, unless you've done some serious digging in the research, is an underlying heavy metal toxicity. Now, all of them are applicable, but the one that is most specific and linked with underlying Candida infections is mercury. And believe it or not, we're still being exposed to mercury, even though they stopped the amalgam fillings and we don't have thermometers that have mercury in them. My patients who I test heavy metals on, which I test regularly, that always come back with the highest levels of mercury, eat sushi once a week. That's right, fish contains a lot of heavy metals. Specifically are out in the ocean type fish, not necessarily our fatty fish or freshwater fish. You do better there. But yeah, my people who consume sushi have a lot of mercury in their system. And there's this weird relationship between mercury and yeast. It's almost like yeast feeds on mercury. So if you have abundance of mercury in your system and you don't address that, you're not ever going to get completely over a Candida infection. Now, before I get into the most effective treatment, natural treatment for squashing a Candida infection, I just want to remind you to click that subscribe button. And while you're down there, give me a thumbs up, give me a like, and turn those notifications on. I am regularly producing videos for you, teaching you how to take back control of your health. And this way you won't miss out on a future episode. So click the subscribe button, give me a like, and turn those notifications on, and you will be set. Awesome. Let's get into those natural ways that are the most effective for squashing a Candida infection and helping you be certain you won't ever have a future one. Here's the deal. If you want long-lasting results, you want to get over it fast and then not have them come back, one of the main areas that you need to address is your gut health. Okay? Now, you may not necessarily be having all the digestive symptoms that some other people who are dealing with candida infections are experiencing, but that does not mean that your gut is not in working order. Okay? You don't have to have symptoms, specifically gut symptoms, to say that the gut is not functioning the way that it should. One of the best ways to start focusing on gut health and really stepping up its game and squashing out this candida infection is by changing up your diet. Yeah, I know lots of people don't like to do this, but if you want to get rid of candida, you want to stop having yeast infections, you have to change your diet. The biggest amount of fuel that keeps that yeast thriving in your system is coming from what you're putting in your mouth. Diet absolutely is the most common cause, as I was saying, like sugar is the most common trigger of a candida infection. So we want to avoid diets that are high in sugar. We want a diet that is low sugar, low carbohydrate, and really good at reducing inflammation. That is what's very healing to the gut and will start giving your body what it needs to kill off this candida infection. Not to mention, you're going to be starving it by avoiding all of those high sugary foods. So as far as some basic principles go for what would a more classic candida diet look like, I'm going to give you the following, okay? So we already know we want a diet that is low sugar, low carbohydrate. We want to avoid foods that have added sugars to them. You want to eat a lot of non-starchy types of vegetables, and most of these you'll find growing above the ground. Our more starch-containing vegetables grow beneath the ground. It's not to say you can't have them at all, but maybe use them more sparingly, like once, maybe twice at most per week. And then you want to consume low sugar fruits if you're even going to consume fruit. Now, my thing is, in the beginning of all of this, if you really want to get ahead of things, you're avoiding fruit just because it does have those natural occurring sugars and you're really trying to starve out that yeast that's in your system. But when you get a few weeks into this and things are improving, you've adopted this new way of eating, adding back maybe a serving of fruit, low sugar fruit, every day, every other day is acceptable and won't keep you from making forward progress. Eating a lot of fermented foods is really helpful for re-inoculating the gut and feeding those good guys that live there what they need in order to thrive. Now, when it comes to fermented foods, I know some people are like, oh, well, it's pickled stuff. Like I can get sauerkraut pickles and all that. The biggest thing is if you get those foods from the aisles, not the refrigerated section, you're missing out on all the benefits. When we heat treat things, we lose a lot of their healing properties. So go for fermented foods that are in the refrigerated section. You should also be minimizing your caffeine when you're working at squashing out candida. You can definitely enjoy lots of healthy and clean proteins and those healthy good fats. I would absolutely stay away from gluten I'd stay away from gluten period in this country. But when you're dealing with candida, it will really help you to avoid gluten and any other gluten-containing foods. Absolutely, you want to minimize or avoid altogether alcohols. Okay, if you avoid it altogether, you're just going to put your healing process on fast forward. And you definitely want to maximize your nutrition and drink lots of water. Now, there's a second piece in here for really helping boost gut health and squashing out a candida infection, and that would be like one of the main nutrients I would add in, without question, would be probiotic. Probiotics really help to get more of those good guys in and can help rebalance some of that gut flora that may have been disrupted from being on birth control or taking an antibiotic, even if it was years ago. This also helps boost your immune system too, which that is where your immune system lives. And then another type of nutrient or nutritional you could take would be an antifungal, more on the lines of like oregano oil or caprylic acid. You can get oregano oil pearls and just take whatever is recommended on the bottle to help your body be able to kill off the unwanted candida that much quicker, while you're creating a more suitable environment for your body and getting rid of the foods we know that are going to feed the yeast, while giving your body the foods it needs to optimize gut health and also your immune health. Now, if you really want to take this whole process and put it on fast forward, then you really want to know what is the underlying factor, like where is my health really at? Do I have other conditions? Do I have heavy metal issues? What are my nutrient imbalances? Like, what is it that keeps me being prone, aside from the triggers, to Candida infections, then I encourage you to go down to the description below the video. Click on it, make sure it expands out, and look for the link that says From Sluggish to Unstoppable. I am giving you my free ebook, From Sluggish to Unstoppable, that shares with you the exact process I use with my patients who are dealing with chronic Candida types of infections and helps them resolve it once and for all. So go ahead, click on that to claim your copy, and I appreciate you being here. Hopefully this has been helpful. Again, I love your comments. Give me any feedback, and don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn those notifications on, and we'll see you on a future episode. God bless.